Switzerland's F-35 procurement program has once again entered the spotlight, becoming a focal point of both political controversy and strategic debate within the country. What began as a straightforward component of the broader Air 2030 modernization initiative has transformed into a multi-layered discussion about defense priorities, financial predictability, neutrality, and Switzerland's long-term air power strategy. The latest development, the proposal to reduce the number of ordered F-35A jets from 36 to 30, with the possibility of adding more later, reveals far more than a simple budget adjustment. It exposes the tension between Switzerland's political culture and the practical realities of modernizing a small air force in a rapidly changing security environment. The core of the current dispute stems from a misunderstanding over what exactly the United States meant by fixed price in the original agreement. While Swiss authorities interpreted this terminology as a binding total contract cost of around $7.44 billion, the U.S. government's understanding was different. Washington's version of fixed price implied that Switzerland would pay the same unit price the Pentagon pays for its own F-35A aircraft, meaning any future fluctuations in the jet's cost on the American side would directly carry over. As a result, when program adjustments, inflation, and updated production costs began shifting the Pentagon's own calculations, Switzerland's estimated financial obligations rose accordingly, and the shockwaves of this difference in interpretation have fueled political criticism inside the country. Opposition parties quickly seized on the issue, accusing the government of failing to properly safeguard taxpayer money and of allowing itself to become overly dependent on the United States for security needs. The timing only intensified the backlash. Washington's recent decision to raise tariffs on Swiss exports, in some cases up to 39%, has strained bilateral relations and created the impression that Switzerland is being economically pressured on several fronts simultaneously. In this environment, the F-35 procurement became part of a broader national conversation about autonomy, leverage, and the true cost of strategic cooperation with the United States. As the debate expanded, three political factions emerged. The first group advocates canceling the F-35 acquisition entirely. Their argument is rooted in skepticism toward the aircraft's price, maintenance obligations, and long-term interoperability requirements with U.S. systems. They argue that Switzerland's neutrality could be compromised by relying on a platform so deeply integrated into NATO's digital architecture, even if Switzerland itself is not a NATO member. This camp prefers exploring alternatives, either extending the life of existing aircraft, such as the F divided by a -18C divided by D Hornets, or turning back to European manufacturers for a future fighter solution. The second faction argues the opposite. Not only should Switzerland keep the F-35 deal, but it should increase the number of jets acquired to ensure sufficient capability for modern air defense. These supporters emphasize the aircraft's unmatched sensor suite, stealth characteristics, and networked warfare capabilities. They warn that Europe's security environment is deteriorating quickly, and that a fleet of only 36 aircraft might leave Switzerland unable to provide credible air policing, territorial defense, and rapid response duties simultaneously. For this camp, the F-35 symbolizes long-term strategic security and the modernization needed to protect Swiss airspace in an era of hypersonic missiles, stealth drones, and more assertive great power competition. The third group, representing a compromise position, supports the acquisition but insists on controlling costs more tightly. Their preferred solution is to scale back the initial purchase to 30 aircraft while leaving open the possibility of expanding the fleet later. This approach preserves political and fiscal flexibility without completely altering the existing defense strategy. It is within this middle ground that Defense Minister Martin Pfister has positioned himself. Pfister's proposal, moving from 36 to 30 jets while keeping the program within the established financial ceiling, highlights the delicate balancing act he must perform. On one side is the need to maintain credibility with the Swiss public by demonstrating fiscal discipline. On the other is the obligation to guarantee the operational readiness of the Air Force, which relies heavily on a small number of aircraft to fulfill all its missions. His suggested plan to later acquire up to 10 additional aircraft, if funding becomes available, reflects an attempt to modernize the fleet without provoking political backlash or exceeding budgetary constraints. Importantly, the number 30 is not arbitrary. For a country with Switzerland's geography and security model, even a small reduction in fleet size has practical consequences. The Swiss Air Force must maintain around-the-clock air policing, rapid interception capability, and readiness for emergency operations. With maintenance cycles, pilot training requirements, and the need for aircraft availability during periods of heightened tension, a fleet that is too small risks operational overstretch. This is why the prospect of a follow-on order, bringing the total to as many as 40 jets, is already being quietly discussed within defense circles and reported by Swiss media such as Blick. Yet the additional order cannot be taken for granted. It will depend on future budgets, political shifts, and the broader trajectory of the F-35 program itself. If costs continue to rise, even supporters of the aircraft may be forced back into the defensive position of explaining why the world's most advanced fighter also remains one of the most expensive. Conversely, if production efficiencies improve and prices stabilize as the F-35 enters later stages of its procurement cycle, Switzerland may find itself in a better financial position to expand the fleet without excessive debate. Another key consideration is timing. If Switzerland postpones additional purchases for too long, future orders may arrive at higher cost or face delays due to production bottlenecks. Countries across Europe, including Finland, Germany, the Czech Republic, the Netherlands, and Italy, are rapidly expanding their F-35 fleets, and global demand continues to increase. For Switzerland, entering the queue later could have logistical and financial implications, potentially complicating Air Force planning for the 2030s and 2040s. Ultimately, the unfolding situation illustrates not a breakdown of Swiss defense planning, but the complexity of acquiring a cutting-edge fighter aircraft in a high-stakes geopolitical environment. The F-35 is more than a military platform, it is a strategic choice that binds its users into a long-term ecosystem of training, upgrades, data management, and industrial cooperation. Switzerland must decide how deeply it wants to integrate into that ecosystem while preserving its political independence and maintaining fiscal responsibility. Pfister's proposal reflects an attempt to reconcile these competing pressures without abandoning the technological advantages the F-35 offers. Whether the Federal Council will accept this strategy remains to be seen. But one thing is clear, the debate surrounding Switzerland's F-35 procurement is not simply about numbers on a spreadsheet. It is about how the country positions itself in an increasingly unstable world, how it balances neutrality with security realities, and how it navigates the challenges of modernizing its armed forces in a way that remains politically acceptable. The final decision will shape Switzerland's air power capabilities for decades, and the outcome of today's debate will determine the strategic flexibility of tomorrow's Swiss Air Force.